Well, my topic's going to be about dating. Now, if someone in here thinks this is about romantic dating, you're in the wrong lecture. Anyway, is the earth millions or billions of years old? Well, you hear statements like this is from Christianity Today. Carl Giberson says, agree among yourselves that the earth is old, since science has proved it. Oh, yeah? And some people don't think the age of the earth issue is all that important. And of course, these people have already accepted billions of years, and they say that. And so here's one quote from Davis Young, retired professor of geology at Calvin College, and his current replacement, Ralph Stearley. Excuse me. We have concluded that the Bible is not concerned about the age of the earth at all. Oh, yeah? The Bible leaves it up to humans to try to figure out how old the earth is, if that is what the question that interests us. And by the way, this book, The Bible, Rocks and Time and Geological Evidence for an Age of the Earth, I've reviewed that. And it's a horrible book. I mean, it's attacking us. But did they get any good evidence from us? No. You look at their bibliography and their references. They hardly referenced any of our material. We've done 60 years of research, and we have hundreds of books out now and DVDs. You'd think these guys would get into it, but they didn't. So they kind of erected a straw man, what they think we believe, and just cut it all down. That's essentially what the book was about. That's why it's horrible. The scholarship is horrible. Anyway, when I see or read things like that, I go to my theme verse and research. Examine everything carefully, hold fast that which is good. You got to dig. Otherwise, you might know just enough to get in trouble. So, here's an overview of my presentation. I'm going to show ages are important. The age of the earth, millions of years, called deep time, are important. The Bible actually says it's young. Secular dating methods say old, but they have many problems. There are dating methods that indicate that the earth is young. And there's claimed slow processes that supposedly take millions of years, like the formation of coal, the formation of ice age, and formations of this and that. There's hundreds of them. They say are way too old for the young earth. Well, I'm going to show that bringing the flood back into our worldview, all these slow processes accelerate. Anyway, it's important. Why? Because 89% of Christian students attend public school. 60% who attend church in high school will leave the church after they leave home. 2/3 are going to be gone. So, Answers in Genesis wanted to find out why they left. So they had a pollster ask 1,000 of them, why did you leave, that are 20 to 29 years old? There's a lot of reasons. And when did you first have your doubts? 40% first had doubts about the Bible in middle school. 44% had doubts in high school, 11% in college. So the title of that book that Ken Ham and his pollster wrote was a book already gone. In other words, they're sitting in the pews. They look like normal Christians, but their mind is gone because they've been taught that you can't trust the Bible, the earth is old, it's not young, evolution's a fact, etc. And you know where they get that, don't you? In the schools, in the cultures, and so forth. And it's important that we're losing this. In fact, Bruce mentioned that a newer statistic indicate that the number that leave is even more than the 66% nowadays. So, wow, it's important. Now, we can trust the Bible because, and the ages that the Bible gives are important, are accurate, because there's thousands of ancient manuscripts, including the Dead Sea Scrolls, clear back to almost the time that John died. And we've had fulfilled prophecy, which some amazing prophecies. Archaeological verification. We can dig up a lot of these places. And there's thousands. Now, this is one that you probably hadn't heard of. Thank Dr. Jerry Bergman for this one. He wrote an article about this. There's thousands of statements thought to be true when the Bible is being written that are actually false, and they never made it into the Bible. Another indication that this is divinely inspired. So, does the Bible say it's a young earth? Yeah, we can add up all those genealogies. Okay, we'll spend the next 20 minutes going through all these, and I'll put you all asleep. Anyway, we can do this. Add up the genealogies in Genesis 5 and so forth, so on. And then from Shem to Abraham, we have the same. But we'll cut to the chase and get to the point that about 4,000 years between the creation of Adam and Christ's birth, and when this slide was printed in 2005, so it was a little more than 6,000 years old. So the Bible, the genealogies indicates a young earth, or young to Adam. And you go further into the statements that Jesus made, there isn't a gap between the creation of Adam and the creation of everything else before that. And what did Jesus have to say about all this stuff? Well, what did he believe? Well, in Mark 24:37-39, he says, "But as in the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." See, Jesus believed in a real Noah. "For as in the days that were before the flood, they're eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage." In other words, business as usual, not paying attention to the signs of the times, until the day that Noah entered the ark. And they knew not until the flood came and took a few of them away, in a local flood at the Tigris-Euphrates River possibly, took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Oh, but wait, doesn't necessarily mean all the earth. That's true. In some cases, it's not. It means all the region. But when Jesus comes back in Revelations 1:7, it says, all eyes will see him. It's going to be a global coming back. So he's not going to compare a global coming back to a local event, is he? No, but to a global flood. Jesus believed in a global flood. Ark was a real boat. Noah was a real person. And if Jesus believed it, I'm certainly going to do the same. And he said in Mark 13:9, talking about the age of the earth, that for in those days there will be a time of tribulation such as not occurred since the beginning of creation, which God created until now and ever will be. In other words, for tribulation, people have to be around, and they are around from the beginning of the creation. So the Bible does say the earth is young in the New Testament too. And then we have that famous one in Luke 10:6 that says, "But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female." The beginning of creation. Not 4.6 billion years after the creation, he created man towards the end of geological time. It's not like that at all. It doesn't say that. And there's one more, and there's actually Romans 1:20 also says that the attributes of God were seen from the beginning of creation. And so a lot of men have tried to figure out the age of the earth. Now there's tiny little glitches in those genealogies. And I stay out of chronology because I have my hands full in neuroscience, and you get deep into chronology, there's glitches, and not satisfactory to me. I'd rather stick to something more solid like geology. But anyway, some people get into this and specialize in it, and I say more power to you. But anyway, here's some of the dates of creation by various people. Usher is the most famous one. Let's see, my cursor doesn't work, does it? No. Okay. There's Usher. They don't have Isaac Newton on this. What? Isaac Newton did that too. In fact, Isaac Newton wrote more about theology than he did about science, by the way. In fact, the great scientists at his time were predominantly Bible-believing Christians. They developed science. Science could only develop because of the biblical worldview. Oh, but they could be millions of years. Is that possible? Well, when you look at the uses of day outside Genesis 1 and the rest of the Hebrew scripture, days with the number 410 times always means a literal day. Evening and a morning together with a day 38 times always means a literal day. And that's the way Genesis 1 is, the first day, the second, evening and morning. When those adjectives are used in the rest of the Hebrew Old Testament, it means a 24-hour solar day. Now, there are words for long periods of time that could have been used. The Hebrew word, I think, is pronounced yamim, but that wasn't there. The word yom for day is there. Now, sometimes, and maybe less than 5% of the cases, and we're talking about over 2,000 in the Hebrew scriptures, day can be a general period of time, like the day of the Lord. Not necessarily a long period, and not necessarily a day, but kind of a vague period of time, maybe, 10 years or so, but not long periods of time. Okay, ages are important. We're losing young people, and we're losing middle and old age people too. The Bible actually says the earth is young. Secular dating methods say old, but they have many, many problems. An important point in all this is that uniformitarianism, which is the idea of the present is the key to the past, and that's how they explain all the rocks and fossils out there by present processes over millions of years ago, was assumed starting in the late 1700s by scholars when they knew little about geology. It was an arbitrary decision by the so-called Enlightenment. You ever wonder why they called themselves the Enlightenment? Because they thought that they got rid of the superstition of Christianity. You can look in the encyclopedia, and that's what it generally says. And they became the enlightened ones. And all that was before them was called the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages. That's when Christian worldview predominated. But guess what? A great book, Rodney Stark is a great source for a lot of this. He was a professor of the history of religion at the University of Washington. I think I had him as a prof once, but I didn't know it until years later. But he goes back and looks at historical sources, and he says there's no such thing as the Dark Ages. There's great inventions all through history, ever since Rome fell. In fact, when they threw out the Bible and brought in uniformitarianism in deep time, they didn't even know the origin of basalt and granite. There was an argument between the Neptunists and the Vulcanists. Neptunists thought basalt was deposited by water. Vulcanists thought, it was molten, it's igneous rock. Well, they're the ones that won out. So these are arbitrary beliefs that they assumed, and they've been assumed for over 200 years, locked in concrete in their mind. So we need to realize a few things. Rocks do not come with dates on them. It's an inference from present data, chemical data, or whatever. They're interpretations of evidence in the present. And there's many indications that the millions of years do not exist. And I show them this cartoon. The real data there, the real science is the bone they dug up and the sediment was found in. That's the science. The interpretation of how old it is an interpretation. And like I've said, this is the only rocks that come with dates. Anyway, we had 3 main dating challenges. 3 main ones: starlight and time, and the speed of light. In other words, stars, billions of light years out there. How could they arrive on Earth when they're billions of light years out there? A light year is how long it takes light to travel in 1 year. Then radiometric dating and those slow processes. So 3 main challenges. And I'm not going to get into them too deep, but what I say to the first one is that they have the same problem. It's called the horizon problem. In the Big Bang, in less than a second, the universe expands to almost the same size as today in less than a second. And because the temperature of space is the same in all directions, you have to have radiation going back and forth, absorb, re-radiate to even out the temperatures. That's the way it works. And it has to go millions of times the speed of light to do that. So they have the same problem as us. We have 5 theories by different people trying to explain it. And it might not be able to be explained, I might add. We might have to just trust that God did it and He knows what He's doing and have the faith. We have answers, though. We have enough answers and evidence to indicate that the Bible is true and go from there. But anyway, let's talk about radiometric dating. As soon as I bring up that slide that I overshot. Okay, this is radiometric dating. But anyway, the way it works, it's very complicated. I'm going to try to simplify it. You got an atom, and it's unstable in the nucleus. And at a certain rate, it gives off energy in a particle. So that's a radioactive atom. And there's generally 5 main dating methods where you date rocks: potassium argon, uranium lead, thorium lead, samarium neodymium, SM and ND, those are chemical symbols, rubidium strontium methods. Those are the 5 main ones. Carbon-14 doesn't date rocks. It dates carbon. And it doesn't date anything over, it can't date anything over 80,000 years. I'll get to that, I think. But here's kind of how, you can think of it as an hourglass. You have one element that's unstable and it's changing to another element. In this case, uranium to lead. And it's like an hourglass. Uranium's at the top, lead's at the bottom. And it flows through at a certain measurable rate. So you date when the lava or an igneous rock cools. You date the cooling time. And you date by what's called half-life, where half the uranium is gone and changes to lead. And you measure the time. The time goes to the right. And the uranium's called the parent element, and the lead's called the daughter element. So the half-life is when half of it's gone. Another half-life would be when there's a quarter of it gone. So 2 half-lives, 3 half-lives, 1/8 is left. And then finally, 4 half-lives, 1/16 is left. That's called the half-life. And that's what you use in radiometric dating. Now, we have to make some assumptions. First of all, you got a rock right here. And you got to know what the initial amount of uranium, we'll use the uranium lead method. You got to know the amount of uranium at the beginning, amount of lead at the beginning. How do you know that? Well, you would think that, well, they start with a lot of uranium but no lead. Wrong. They always start with some leads. Lead's always there. How much? How much is radioactive and how much was there from the beginning? Well, they have to go on more assumptions to determine how much of that lead is what they call primordial lead and how much is from radioactive decay. Also, you have this rock here, it must be in a closed system. Now, that closed system sounds mysterious, doesn't it? What it means is the rock has to be sealed, where you can't bring uranium in or out, lead in or out, and it's got to be sealed for millions and billions of years. And then the rate of decay of uranium to lead has to be constant over time. Those are the three main assumptions. And we can kind of illustrate this by the hourglass again. For instance, there's a starting amount, the parent element, and that's the starting amount of lead. Now, some dating methods, you do start with zero, like potassium argon. Zero argon, supposedly. And anyway, you can't gain any uranium, and you can't gain any lead. It has to be a closed system. You can't lose any in millions and billions of years. And many of these dating methods, many of these elements they move a lot in water. Uranium moves a lot in water. And going from uranium to lead, you have 18 steps, of which one of them is radium, and another is radon. And we do know that radon escapes from the system, do we not? Because it's coming up into our basements. And so let's test radiometric dating with rocks of known age and see how they do. Because they should work reliably on rocks of known age, and different techniques agree consistently. Well, we got a lot of these dates. Here's the dome of Mount St. Helens. After Mount St. Helens blew in 1980, lava has been pushing up slowly. And Dr. Steve Austin and others went up there and grabbed samples of that freshly cooled lava and dated it. And here's the dates they got in various methods by the potassium argon. K is potassium, argon is AR is argon. See, they got up to dates of 2.8 million years based on various minerals, or the whole rock, 0.35 million years. But it only cooled about 10 years ago. And here's a mountain I'm not even going to try to pronounce, New Zealand. And this has been dated, there it is, the top of it, and it's been dated, these are the actual flows of lava. And that's what they look like under a microscope. Anyway, you got potassium argon ages that range from 0 to 3.5 million years when the lava cooled. And in Grand Canyon, if anyone's floated Grand Canyon, I've done it twice. On the northwest rim, you have these cones, fresh volcanoes, and lava that's actually come down and coated the walls of the Grand Canyon. And you got these black areas. Oh, I get them. These black areas are lava flows, and so you can date them by radiometric methods. And they give 1.07 billion years by what's considered the best method out, the rubidium-strontium isochrone method. But then they date these basalts right in here, and they get older ages, 1.34 billion years. Something is wrong somewhere. And then they use different dating methods on those areas, and you can see they range quite a bit. One dating method called the lead isochrone method gave 2.6 billion years. right there. But they think this is the best method right there, but other method gave variable results. Then there's, in Australia, there were some sediments laying on a basalt layer. And that basalt was dated 30 million years old. The sand and clay below it, I believe, 255 million years. But then there was some wood down there they can date by the carbon-14 method. And it gave, what did it give? The basalt 45 million years, the wood 44 to 4,500 years, or 1,000 years. Something's wrong somewhere. And carbon-14 is great for about 3,000 years. Right in here. But between 3,000 years and the time of the flood, which is approximately 4,500 years when the Ice Age occurs, all their time, which is about 50,000 years in here, has to telescope within 1,500 years of ours. And we're still figuring out how that occurs. In fact, I belong to an international group on Zoom that is trying to figure out this system. I've been dealing with another system that's formed like carbon-14. It's called beryllium-10. It's another isotope, and it has a different pathway from carbon dioxide. Carbon-14. Carbon-14 forms by cosmic rays up in the upper atmosphere. It binds with oxygen, becomes carbon dioxide, and since plants bring it in, it's spread throughout the whole biosphere. You have carbon-14 in you right now. You are all radioactive. And then it decays. Once the organism dies, it decays back, and it has a half-life of only 5,730 years. So practically, it only dates to 50,000 years in their time scale. Beyond that, they worry about contamination. But beyond 80,000 years, you can't even detect it anymore. It's gone. So if you find anything that you think that is old, that has carbon-14 in it, it's not old. It's less than 80,000 years. And we've done that. We've dated coal by carbon-14. We've done it over a dozen times, and they've done it probably a couple hundred times. And guess what? You always find carbon-14 in coal. Coal is pure carbon. And coal is dated anywhere from 15 million years to 350 million years. It can't be those millions of years if there's carbon-14 in it. So they say contamination. Well, let's analyze that. They always have dodges for these problems. They have numerous problems. You got to dig into the dodge. So, contamination of coal. These guys that go out and get samples take pains to avoid contamination. In other words, if there's a crack going down the coal where you can think some young carbon escaped down there, they would avoid that. That's how young carbon could get down there. Not a lot, I wouldn't think. So we decided to humor them. Creation scientists did this next one. We dated diamonds. No one had ever dated diamonds by carbon-14. And they wouldn't because, obviously they're too old to have carbon-14. And they're dated about 1 to 2 billion years. They come from about 100 miles down in the earth, and they come up rapidly in these diatremes, or kimberlite pipes, as some of the geological jargon they call them. Anyway, we dated diamonds, and guess what? We found carbon-14 in all of them. And we got an age of 58,000 years as a maximum. That indicates that there are billions and millions of years. Coal and this are fictitious. And by the way, they've they've tried to challenge this and find ways around it. And the researchers, which have PhDs in physics or geophysics, have easily shot them down with their dodges. Now, I personally have a reason why I have found it easy to be skeptical of millions of years right off the bat. I was a weather forecaster for 30 years. I ruined thousands of outdoor activities. And so as a result, and we could barely, when I got in the National Weather Service, we could barely forecast the weather a day in advance. The weather models were that bad. Now they're really good, and they do good to 5 days and even beyond. I am so amazed on how well they're doing lately. So if we can't hardly forecast the weather a day in advance, why should I believe them when they talk about all these millions of years stuff? So anyway, it was easy for me to disbelieve in millions of years. But let's talk about another research project. Why do they give millions of years still? Let's talk about granite. Russell Humphreys decided that he was going to date zircon crystals in granite. They're in those black minerals in granite. They're called biotite. And here are zircon crystals. They're very tiny. And so he got a core that drilled down, and he got zircon crystals. Now, zircon crystals are highly radioactive with uranium. And so when uranium decays to lead, it gives off 8 helium nuclei that grab electrons and became helium atoms. And so the helium is bouncing around. It doesn't react with anything. It's a noble gas. And finally, it reaches the edge, and some of them leak out at a certain rate that never had been measured before, and we had it measured in a lab. We got all these measurements, the dates and stuff, from secular labs. By the way, is that balloon still up there? Okay, that's going to leak out at a certain rate, and it's going to come tumbling down. Maybe when the pastor's preaching, it'll land right on his head. But anyway, we calculated the leak rate, and we calculated the amount of lead and uranium in it, and here's what we got. Uranium to lead, calculated an age of 1.5 billion years. At 1.5 billion years of decay in these zircon crystals. But it was so full of helium, and from the leak rate, it was only about 5,680 years, plus or minus 2,000. And we know about leak rates. It's called diffusion. It's well known in physics. And so, based on that, the only thing we can conclude is that within 6,000 years, that's the age of the zircon crystal, we had 1.5 billion years of radioactive decay occur. In other words, we call it accelerated radiometric decay. And that caused all the dating methods to decay rapidly. And that's why they give millions and billions of years in those dating methods. And here's kind of a summary of Humphrey's helium diffusion and some questions. A biotite does not impede helium diffusion. Zircons contain too much helium. Both uranium is decayed at 1.5 billion years at today's rate. The only solution is radiometric decay. The results are very solid. Radiometric dates are wrong. Okay, we're going to switch topics. We talked about the ages are important. The Bible says it's young. Secular dating methods say old, but they have many problems, and we can explain those old ages. Now there are dating methods that indicate a young Earth, or a young solar system, or a young universe. And there's many of them. Here's a list done by Dr. Don Batten of now with Creation Ministries International. Anyway, I'm just going to showcase a few of them. Like sediments. entering the ocean, enter at a certain rate, leave if we're having plate tectonics by subduction. You so do a little math, and you find out that the oceans should fill with sediments in about 12 million years. And you can do the same with salt and other things. Seafloor sediments are young, too young for their millions and billions of years. Comets. Now, short period comets go out around the sun and out by Jupiter. And that's called a short period comet. It's an elliptic ellipse. When it approaches the sun, the radiation pressure is what drives off the material in this comet, like water vapor and carbon dioxide, and forms a tail. So it's always losing matter going around. So it's not going to take too much time around before it's gone, because what we know about comets is they're small, they call them dirty snowballs, because there's a lot of water vapor. They're not bound gravitationally too tight. They're not very big, maybe anywhere from 6 kilometers to maybe 50 kilometers. So they're small. So they're going to disappear actually pretty quick. And we've put several numbers on them, but the number that sticks in my mind is that in 50,000 years, we should have no short period comets in the solar system, indicating solar system is less than 50,000 years. Oh, but isn't there some place where we're regenerating and they're coming in? Well, first of all, it's very hard to get a comet in an orbit like that. It's a special orbit. And secondly, we never see any comets coming in, even though they claim they're out there and a passing star will bring them in. That's all theory, no observations. But we do see them disappearing. We have about 200 of them left. We've seen them hit Jupiter. Yeah, I think in 1994 you had, what was the name of that comet? Hale-Bopp or something like that. It broke into pieces and then it hit Jupiter. And we've witnessed them breaking apart. Those meteor showers we have on some nights of the year is because we're going through the tail of a disintegrated comet. And we get all kinds of what they call shooting stars. Comets are disappearing, not forming, and at the rate they're losing matter, the solar system is less than 50,000 years. That's one of our best dating methods. I bet you when I saw my cursor back, you probably didn't. Yeah, this double screen thing is, anyway, shorelines. I did a calculation and I sent in a paper to the Journal of Creation recently. It's kind of interesting. I sent it in over a year ago and I haven't heard a single thing. Publishing is very slow in creation science, let me tell you. Every one of those resources out there has taken me up to 3 or 4 years once I got the first draft in. It's slow and tedious and frustrating, I've found, but I feel it's well worth it. Anyway, shorelines are receding at a certain rate. You can take an average, measure it, and if they're more than, say, a couple million years old, like England should have disappeared by now at the present rate of shoreline recession. And all the continents should be into the ocean at the rate it's retreating in about 12 million years. And obviously that hasn't happened, so another indication it's young. Anyway, ages are important. We're losing the young people, especially on the age question. I forgot to give you the poll numbers, but one of the biggest things that made him doubt the Bible was all these millions of years. That was more important than evolution, believe it or not. And the Bible says it's young, and I went through secular dating methods, have lots of problems, and there are dating methods that say they're young. What about this claim slow processes? I'm going to go through only a couple of them. Here's a quick sample of some of them right here. Coal and oil, you probably have heard of coal and oil, take millions of years. Thick sediments take millions of years. Valleys and canyons, Dinosaur tracks and eggs, ice ages. These are some of the last two I've worked on, and I'm going to showcase especially those. But I have one quick slide on valleys and canyons. You know, did that little river erode this wide valley in millions of years? Well, they say that, but when you bring the flood back into Earth history, the channelized flow of the flood can do it rapidly. This is what they would believe. Oh, give that 1,000,000 years. But the flood can do that in a day, arrive at that. See the difference? See what happens when you bring the flood back? Oops. And I'm going to rapid formation of dinosaur tracks, eggs, and scavenged bone beds. This was considered one of the most severe challenges to creation science at one time, because these tracks, eggs, and scavenged bone beds were early in the flood because they were from live dinosaurs that had to be dead by the peak of the flood. So that's when all the sediments were redeposited, a lot of fast currents, chaos, and people challenge us, well, you can't have tracks made in a global flood like that. Well, the flood is a lot more complicated than people realize. So here's an old slide of some dinosaur tracks. Here is one that I took in northeast Wyoming. They're on flat bedding plains. Always on flat bedding plains. They don't seem to climb any hills. And I always found that interesting. And here is a duck-billed dinosaur found on top of a coal mine in Utah. Believe it or not, you have dinosaur tracks on the tops of coal mines. I can relate that to this model here, but it'd take a little bit too much time, and Mike hasn't told me the time yet. You haven't? That much? Come on. How many? No, I'm going to hurry. Here's dinosaur eggs, and here's a picture of eggs, and here's a T-Rex tooth. And you find those in bone beds, but only that. You don't find the skeleton. It means they broke off their teeth chomping on those bones. Here's a chomped on bone from the Blackfeet Indian Reservation. I had special permission to go up there and saw some great things on that reservation. I'll tell you, there's some fantastic dinosaur features. Anyway, the way it works, I developed the beds hypothesis. Rapid sedimentation. Here's kind of a box diagrams. 3 time slices. Think of each one of these boxes as maybe 100 miles wide. 2 time slices. Rapid sedimentation, time T1, time 2, T2, and time 3, T3. Then, as it shallows, you have a local drop in the level of the flood, because the flood's not going up smoothly. It's going up like this, based on 5 mechanisms, tides being one. So suddenly you have a drop, and there you got 100 miles of land suddenly on a flat bedding plain from freshly laid sediments. Oh, the dinosaurs swimming and trying to survive, get up on that, make tracks, lay eggs, eat dead dinosaurs, and then you have a rise, and it covers up all that material. So that's the beds hypothesis, and you can learn more about it in the book. It has a different cover. It's not a hardcover, Dinosaur Challenges and Mysteries. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about rapid ice ages. They claim that ice ages are so slow. In fact, they have 5 major ice age periods. The Pleistocene, late Paleozoic, late Ordovician, there you go. 5 of them. I believe that our ice age is only within their Pleistocene time scale, but only the last ice age. Well, they have 50 of them, which I believe 49 are fictitious. The last one is real. These are a lot different. These are in solid rock, and they do have ice age features, but landslides can duplicate these things. So I wrote a resource, 1993, just on that topic. Ancient ice ages are gigantic submarine landslides. So that explains 4 of those 5. And then there's all kinds of evidence for an ice age out there, like striated pavements and erratic boulders. This is in the high Sierra Mountains, where the glaciers polished the granite. And they have these nice moraines around a lot of places. You're not seeing my cursor. That's right. I got to remember that. Here's a nice lateral moraine, a small end moraine, and a lateral moraine. And when you go down to the level of the lake, you look at the moraine and you see the trees for scale. That moraine is 600 feet tall. And it's pretty sharp looking, so it's pretty recent. And the scratches you saw haven't been weathered out yet, meaning the ice age wasn't that long ago. And when you look at the moraine material, it's deposits from that you see from current glaciers, rocks of all sizes in a finer grain matrix. And you see these erratic boulders all over, like this one right here. This is the southwest of Calgary, Canada, called the Okotoks erratics. It's a chain of them, 600 kilometers long in a narrow band. And water didn't roll that down because it's very angular. And here's a very famous one in Acadia National Park in Maine called Bubble Rock. And here is one that you should recognize because this type of sediment's all over this area. This is an argillite, a metamorphic shale, part of the belt supergroup rock that's all around here. And there it is, southwest of Portland, Oregon. Argillite doesn't outcrop anywhere in the state of Oregon. The only way it can get down there is on an iceberg in the Lake Missoula flood. And if there's a Lake Missoula flood, there was an ice age, of which we can explain. And here's the pathway of the Lake Missoula flood on the northern part of the pathway. And we were talking out in the field, looking at some of the features down on I-90, and talking about how you form rhythmites. Well, south of this, there was a large lake that suddenly formed 600 feet deep because the water couldn't get through Wallula Gap, so it backed up 600 feet deep, backwashed up the side valleys. And the lake was going up and down because all these channels coming in were converging and diverging, lifting the water, dropping it, and causing waves to go up the valley, sending pulses of sediment up the valleys, forming these rhythmites. That's kind of a quickie. So I'm going to move on, and I've calculated, based on the cooling time of the oceans, how long to reach glacial maximum. So about 500 years is my best estimate, but I use ranges for the variables because there's no way to be accurate. And the ranges are fairly young, so I had to estimate the average depth, and I got into the details of how fast it would melt. It melts pretty fast, about 10 meters a year once it gets going. The reflectivity of the snow is the big variable that would vary. So along the edge, the periphery, I estimate about 70 years it would melt, but interior Canada, interior Scandinavia would be slower, 200 years. Ice Age is 700 years. They claim it's 100,000 years. We don't need long periods of time for an ice age. And the ice age was caused by the flood. So you bring back the flood into our memory, we can solve all these claimed processes that are supposed to take hundreds of thousands to millions of years. Oil forms rapidly, coal forms rapidly, a whole bunch of things form rapidly. It's because they threw out the flood at this time of the so-called Enlightenment, starting in the late 1700s. That's why they say all these processes are old and contrary to the Bible. So in summary, indeed, ages are important for Christians. We're losing the young people in the culture. The culture is bombarding them with deep time and evolution. The genealogies and words of Jesus indicate the earth is young, and we can defend it scientifically. Numerous problems and assumptions are associated with radiometric dating, and we can explain the billions of years by accelerated radiometric dating. Now, we don't know exactly when that occurred. Did it occur at creation? Creation was a great acceleration, wasn't it? That's a good possibility. Some people think during the flood. Anyway, we really don't know. That's why I do research. I've been a researcher for 50 years. So numerous processes indicate a much younger Earth than secular scientists say, such as the decay of short period comets. Claim slow processes can be accelerated during the flood. So it really is a worldview issue, how you view the past. Do you view it from the lens of old ages, deep time? That's all you're going to see. But from the Bible, using sometimes the same data, we see something totally different. Anyway, I want to talk about this resource. I was asked by a pastor at one of these Rocky Mountain Bible mission, yeah, that I spoke at here 8 years ago or so, and they say, I want to know about these dating methods. What's with them? And even the simple stuff we have out for lay people is way too complicated. So I challenged myself, said, I'm going to write a resource for people with no science background. Hopefully I did that in here. People will have to tell me whether I succeeded or not. But even if I got close, I would be happy. Anyway, it's in geology where this all started. Throwing out the flood, putting in uniform materialism, explaining the rocks by slow processes over millions of years. It all started with geology, which is one reason I got into it, and why I think we should all learn a little geology. You don't have to learn a lot, and you can see for yourself out there in nature these features. And so Dr. Robert Carter and I wrote Biblical Geology 101 to give you a little bit of geology so you can see for yourself. You don't have to learn very much, and it's fun to see this and point it out to your kids and grandkids that are being hammered in the culture. And then I wrote this resource with Dr. John Reed, How Noah's Flood Shaped Our Earth, showing you how the flood explains. I go from the pre-flood, talk about the early flood things you can connect from the Bible to out the nature, and then the late flood and what you see out there in nature, and then what happened after the flood, caused by the flood, mainly the Ice Age. So that's a resource if you're interested in that. And my main resource on the Ice Age is this one, and it includes the woolly mammoth, Frozen in Time. And I think that's all. And I'm going to leave you with this comment, this right here. Your faith should not rest on the wisdom of men. I've given you this several times already. The wisdom of men is trying to explain everything without God. So they got all kinds. They got to explain how the universe came about, how the elements came about, how the laws of physics came about. They even have to explain how religion came about. I don't think you want to read what they say about it. But our faith should rest on the power of God. Amen. And that's, I think, all I have for you. And I thank you.